share a little bit about myself this morning, as everything's been surreal up until this point, and the surreal is becoming real. And you will always be in my heart. Revelstoke will always be in my heart. I was born here. In 1979, if you can believe it or not, I gave my life to Jesus here, just down the road in Perks Drive in my home where I grew up. In 1989, I was baptized in this baptismal tank by Pastor Craig Thomas. Back then, I had long hair. I was into metal and things like that. And yeah, I don't know if you guys remember all that, but I went to high school here, to RSS. I had lots of struggles and discouragements in high school. During that time, I went through some things where I met early on laughter and mockery of my faith from some people, as kids do. And I became kind of ashamed. And I shied away from representing Jesus as a Christian. And I still believed in my deepest of hearts, but I didn't want to tell my friends about it. Sometime around grade 11 or 12, I remember feeling this turmoil within myself. I was very frustrated with myself. I felt like a fake because I was a Christian, but I didn't act like it or think like or to my friends. And I don't remember all of the contexts too much, but I remember one night praying in my bed, very passionately and seriously expressing to God that I really did believe in Him and I really did love Him despite my actions. And I didn't want to be a fake. And I didn't want to be ashamed of Him. And I shared this desire with God that He would make me like a rock. It's interesting that, Tyrell, you use that word today, because that's the word I used in my prayer. You made me like a rock in my faith, or like a deep-rooted tree, a tree with deep roots. And I wanted my life to matter. I didn't feel like a rock. I didn't feel like a solid follower of Jesus, but my prayer was serious. And one thing that I found out is God is also serious when you pray things to Him. He takes our prayers serious, even if we forget them for a long time. Fast forward through my 20s and most of my 30s, God let me go through some difficult times there too, and even times of loneliness and things like that, but also through the most beautiful times. It was there I met my beautiful wife, Jen, teaching. She was my drum student. I was teaching her the drums. That's how I met her in my church in Vancouver, BC. We got married, and then after much prayer, we cast lots about coming to Revelstoke, basically. I had a really good job there, but we made a decision. We were either going to stay in Vancouver or we were going to move to Revelstoke, and we didn't know what to do. And I had an interview for another job. I thought, if I get this other job, then we stay. We prayed that to God, open or close the door. And it's a strange way we did it. We said, if I get this new job, we'll stay. If I don't, we're going to quit my old one and we're going to move. We didn't get the job. And God led us to Revi, where I opened up a wood shop on Victoria. It's all being torn down there and big hole in the ground now, you see, where Johnny's hunting and fishing used to be. All 4 kids of ours were born in this hospital. All 4 kids of ours grew up here physically and have been growing up in their faith. Somewhere around 2013, Jesus called both Jen and I to something that we could have never, ever predicted. No longer would we be working with wood. God was asking us to work with people and to serve His people. And when He called us, I was terrified. Many of you I've told the story to, and there's this strange supernatural experience that's hard for me to communicate with people. Some people believe it, some that don't, but I heard my name on 2 different times. I heard my name audibly called twice, but I can assume by the Lord. And as I heard it, I had this crystal clear knowing in my heart what this was all about. that we were being called. And so pushing against fear and pushing against every common sense reason that I could find, I said, okay, God, I'm here. You can send me. And through my years in the wood shop, God had answered my teenage prayers. He grew a burning deep in my heart that pushed against all my natural introverted fears and my inabilities. And somehow in that time, I knew that if God asked me to do something like this, that He Himself was going to show up and be God to me. And He did. Almost immediately, God helped me with two of my biggest fears. One, public speaking. And two, caring too much about what other people think about me. Maybe that doesn't seem like a miracle to you, but it is to me because I live with myself. I've lived with myself my whole life, it's obvious. And I know myself. And back then, my fears flowed out of too much concern for being liked. But I can say this confidently that God took that away. And I think over the years in the wood shop, how He took that away is He grew this burning in my heart that became so palpable that it eclipsed my fear. And I know you guys over the years, the past 10 years, I have sometimes had to preach about hard things. Sometimes I've had to say things very direct to you, and it's not a simple and easy thing. And sometimes based off of where you are all individually, because everybody's in a different spot, or what your worldview is, maybe there's things that push against where you are and they have offended you. But I want you all to know that every word that I've preached and taught has come first from a love for God and also a love for you. Even though sometimes it's been hard for me when I know that the truth that I'm asked to say on a Sunday is going to offend somebody or make them angry or upset. But on my last day, I wanted to say this, that I care much more about all of you than I do about being liked. I care about your eternity. This morning, I want to quickly read two passages. The first is 1 Corinthians, if you got a Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. And then the second one, you could probably put your finger to, is 2 Corinthians 3. So first one is 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. There's Bibles in the backs of the chairs, or you can just listen, no matter. So I've thought about these passages for a long time. And so this is the Apostle Paul speaking to the Corinthian church. But when I read it, it feels like what my experience in my heart is as well. And he says this, and he says, "So it was with me, brothers and sisters, when I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony about God." So you guys know that, right? Especially the people here back when I started. I had no pastoral experience. I was an elder, but I was never a pastor. I had no previous thing, no big degree. All I had was a call. And I'm so thankful to you. I hope you know that you guys also heard that call. And that you encouraged me in that. So I'm going to read verse 1 again. "When I came to you, I didn't come with eloquence or human wisdom as I proclaimed to you the testimony of God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I came to you with weakness and great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom." And that's why I pray as we go forward, don't rest on whether there's pastor or not at this time. It's all on God's power. That your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power. On my induction service in May 2015, David Harita, he was the director of the fellowship at the time. He was here in support. And afterwards, after we had this barbecue lunch, and after the barbecue, I came up to him and I asked him, I didn't really know what to say, but I said, "You got one piece of advice for me, just a short piece of advice you could share to me as a newbie pastor with no experience?" And he said something like this. He said, "Well, why did you leave your small business? What was it that God put in your heart?" And I said, "I've got this burning to point to Jesus and the cross. That's what I've got. That's all I've got. Proclaim the gospel, the good news." And then David said to me, he said, "Well, after a year or two goes by and the honeymoon period ends and everybody gets used to you as a pastor, you must remember not to let anyone or anything distract you from what God called your heart to do." The Apostle Paul says in verse 3, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified." I am convinced that there is nothing higher and nothing bigger in the world. There's a lot of concerns I know that we all have in life, a lot of questions that people may have, a lot of opinions, a lot of theological thoughts, and a lot of ideas for what makes sense about this, that, and the other thing. But there's nothing, no truth, no idea that can approach the fact that a mighty, sovereign, holy creator of the universe would die for people who don't even like Him at first. Romans 5:8, 6, and 8 says, "You see, just at the right time, while we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly." Right? He didn't wait for us to get godly. He died for us when we were powerless. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. Though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love for everybody in here in this: while we were sinners, that's when Christ died for us. The fact that Jesus died for you, it's not just part of the story. It is the story. God loves you, and this is how you know. He died. Even before you felt drawn to Him, or before you liked Him, even when you were mad at Him, before you even acknowledged that He could even possibly exist, He died for you to pay for sin. His death, right, in exchange for forgiveness of sin. He dies so that whoever believes would not be separated from God for eternity, but will have eternal life with God. And this morning we're going to see some in baptism who are going to go through this in the symbol of baptism. Basically what they're doing is they're not being ashamed of this. They're standing up here and they're going to go in there through the symbol. It's a symbol of baptism. It's not salvation itself. It's a symbol declaring their faith before all of you in the God who died for them. Salvation and forgiveness is grace. It's a free gift from God, offered to anyone, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what kind of things you've done in life. And the Apostle Paul says this. He says this concept: Jesus and Him crucified is the epicenter of what he spent the lion's share of his time preaching and teaching the Corinthian church about. And I feel very strongly the same way. And I hope that you've gotten that from me. That God put a burning in my heart. And like Paul, with fear and trembling, as a weak, terribly flawed person, I desire to always point you to Jesus and the cross. There's nothing more practical for your lives or for your marriages or for any of your relationships or your struggles, nothing more practical for your diseases or your doubts or your big decisions in life than what God did for you on that cross. And this is one of my last parting pleas with you. In my last few minutes as pastor, don't ever lose sight of that. Don't ever lose sight of that. Don't ever take your eyes off Jesus and the cross. Everything else is important, but it all points to that. Right? All roads lead to that. And my hope and prayer is that if you've ever gotten anything of benefit from what God's used me for, that you would understand it's not because of me or some kind of special wisdom or education that I have or anything like that. But Paul would say that it was a demonstration, if you get anything, it's a demonstration of the Spirit's power so that your faith might rest on, not on human wisdom, but God's power. Don't ever take your eyes off Jesus and the cross. Don't ever get sidetracked by silly arguments or gossip in the church. Don't let the way things are done in the church or not done take your eyes off the cross. For example, thinking, oh, the church is too old-fashioned or things are too traditional or they're not old-fashioned or traditional enough. Those things are just form. We got to look above them. Look to Jesus. Don't get focused on comparing yourselves to others in your walk of faith. Don't compare this church to others or new potential pastors to me or me to them. Comparison, I've heard, is the thief of joy. It's not about us. We're all in the same boat here. We're all weak. But He is strong. He must become greater. I must become less. Don't attend services based off of who might be preaching and what you might get out of the service. Rather, attend services because of the love that you have for God and because of what He did for you on that cross. And then love God by loving His beautiful bride, the church. Keep your eyes on Jesus and the cross. And when Jesus brings you a new pastor, you will recognize who it is that God has for you because you've been attuned to Jesus the whole time. I'm going to close by reading in 2 Corinthians now. 2 Corinthians 3, 1-3. This is from the Apostle Paul, but I'm going to read it as if it is from Jen and I. 2 Corinthians 3, 1-3. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again? Or do we need, like some people, letters of recommendation to you or from you? Listen to this. You yourselves are our letter, written on hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. Not on tablets of stone, right, or paper like we use now, but on tablets of human hearts. You guys, Paul says this church is like a letter. Kind of like a letter, I'd say, to the town of Revelstoke and to the world. And Paul says this letter is like our letter. He says it's the result of our ministry. But I always hesitate to say, because I'm not Paul, and I'm so too aware of my own ability. And I would say, because Paul doesn't correct himself, he goes on to say, this church, you guys are a letter that's written not by people, but by God Himself. A letter written on your hearts. And so this is my last pastoral request in the last few minutes, to please be that letter from God to this town. Be the love letter from God to the world. And I would love to hear reports of what God does through you guys through this town. I expect it because God is great and his people are here and he is in this building. And I will never stop praying for you. So the two things, number one, don't ever take your eyes off Jesus in the cross, and be the love letter written by God to this town. The devil is going to want to come in here and cause disturbances. He always does stuff like that. So be sober and awake. Stay on the path. Sometimes it's like hiking, right? We go up hiking, and hiking season's going to start soon. If you get going off, I'm going to go off in this other direction, and you go off in the woods for a while, even if it's a slightly misguided direction, it might take you a lot longer than you think to get back where you were when you left off. So stay on the path. Eyes on Jesus and the cross, and be the letter that God wrote you to be.